Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Drobnis, and CEO of OptfinITy. I want to welcome you all here today. We're expecting another 8 people, so hopefully they'll trickle in and not cause too much of a commotion. But I want to thank you all for coming. We do these lunch and learns almost monthly. I say almost monthly because we typically skip December and maybe once in the summer because nobody around. In fact, our next lunch and learn is on March 20th, so I'll put that in your calendar. It'll be back right here at this location. We will be talking about security. We'll have a security vendor here to discuss that. We also do webinars. Those are also monthly, but the time changes. It's usually the 4th week of the month. We just do one on project management. So I welcome you to go. If you're not getting our newsletter, which I assume most of you are if you're here today, because that's pretty much how we promote most of it. But if you're not, go to our website. You can go ahead and sign up for that. So I do not remember. You guys remember what the webinar is for next month? No? I'm looking back. People know. All right, well, it's in our newsletter. Please take a look at that. It's typically 20 minutes long. It talks about something that is more practical, while these are more what we call business owner-based presentations. And we're going to talk about things that can help your infrastructure and so forth. So before we get started, I just wanted to welcome you all, obviously. I do want to, you're all enjoying this great food, so I want to give a chance for Matt from Pure Perfection Catering to come up here and talk about his organization.
Good afternoon. There's plenty of food, so feel free to get seconds or steal some desserts to go. But I'm the chef and owner of Pure Perfection Catering. We're a full-service catering event company. Our kitchen is located in Herndon, but we service all of Northern Virginia. Fully licensed, permitted, insured, including our Virginia ABC license to serve and sell alcohol. So we do everything from corporate events, in-home events, weddings, bar mitzvahs, anything having to do with food, full professional wait staff. Pure Perfection, large and small events. We are happy to be your catering service.
So one of the great things about being in IT is that we can take care of all your IT needs. You don't have to worry about it. What makes our job great is that we have a lot of vendors who we work with who make our lives easier. So today we're going to be talking about Datto, and I'll introduce Michael in a second. But what Datto does is pretty much takes a copy of your systems, keeps it running should you have a disaster. And so today, we'll get a volunteer with a hammer, and he's going to destroy my laptop. So you'll see what it is, but again, it's great to have vendors that are really the lifeblood of what we do. They make our job easier. So at this point, I would like to welcome and thank Mike Palmer from Datto. Turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Mike DePalma. I'm the Channel Development Manager with Datto. Get to kind of travel all around North America doing these presentations. I've been lucky enough to present alongside some folks from the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. It's really taken me all over the world, so it's been great. For those of you not familiar with Datto, I might kind of introduce what we do. But we are a backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity solution provider based out of Norwalk, Connecticut. So we're about 40 miles east of Manhattan, about a 5-hour drive down from here. For those of the folks in the room that like entrepreneurial type stories, we do have a really cool story. Celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year. Our CEO, Austin McCord, is 32. So you do the math. He founded the company when he was 22 years old. Got out of college, started building these devices by hand and selling them online. And really what kind of differentiated Austin was he kind of rethought what backup could be. There was a lot of really cool innovations going on at the real big enterprise level, right? True business continuity where you can fail over and keep your business up and running, but nobody had really figured out how to bring that to the SMB community. And that's what Austin kind of set out to do. And he saw it as an industry, obviously with huge growth potential, but again, one that wasn't showing a ton of innovation. So if you fast forward 8 years to Q4 of 2015, Wall Street Journal gave us $1 billion valuation. We're actually the only unicorn company in the state of Connecticut. So it took the company from his parents' basement, where he's building these devices, to a $1 billion company in just over 8 years. So it really has been pretty exponential growth. Now we have 26 offices around the world, over 1,400 employees. We have 9 data centers around the world. We have one of the largest private clouds in the world. We've got 2 here in America. We've got one in Reading, Pennsylvania, one out in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm going to get to the importance of why we chose those locations in a minute. But I do a lot of presentations in Canada. First question I get asked at every event is, you're not sending our data down to the States, right? Because they don't trust us, they don't trust our government. So we don't. We've got 2 data centers up in Canada as well. So the idea is you want to keep the data in the country it originates in. So obviously, any data that's replicated to your on-premise device is going to be replicated to these 2 US-based data centers. And if you're not familiar with how large a petabyte is, we're approaching 400 petabytes of data in our cloud. If you're not familiar with how large a petabyte of data is, most people know the size of an MP3 file, right? If you had 1 petabyte of MP3 files, you could play music continuously for 2,000 years. So that's 1 petabyte. We protect close to 400 petabytes of that. So that's a little bit about data. But again, like I mentioned, Austin really wanted to rethink backup. Still to this day, a lot of small to mid-sized businesses kind of view backup as just this insurance policy in case my building burns down, there's some really bad storm, at least I have a second copy of my data sitting somewhere that I know I can access. But really, the companies and that are out there just looking at this backup this way really are very vulnerable to these cyber threats, these cyber hackers that come in, because they're exploiting that. Most people are still using traditional forms of backup. I'm sure everyone in the room is backing up their data in some form, but most people are using things like external hard drives, maybe still using tape, despite the pretty scary failure rates of tape, or cloud backup, right? Which is great. You got a second copy of your data, different geographical location. But again, all of these things are just second copies of your data, just traditional forms of backup. And there's some limitations to those types of backups that the criminals are exploiting. First and foremost, higher failure rates. You can see a much higher failure. I mentioned tape. There's studies out there that will show failure rates of tape anywhere between 30 and 50% of people that aren't updating their tape. So people that are still on that, it's a really risky business. You might say, hey, I'm spending money on backing up my data, but there's a higher failure rate to that. Same goes for the stuff that you're going to go buy over the counter. That's why we partner with strategic partners all over the world, folks like OptfinITy, who are going to make sure that you're in the right device, make sure that it fits your particular environment. We offer a whole bunch of different sizes, and every one of them is custom built. So you're going to meet with Mike and his team. They're going to say, okay, this is what you need for your environment. Manual testing. This goes for both manual taking of the backups and testing of those backups. So anytime you introduce a person into it, user error comes into play, right? If you've got Bill down the hallway who takes care of your backups every Friday afternoon, there's a good chance that he's going to screw up one of these weekends, right? Also, who's testing those backups? The biggest thing when I talk to small businesses is, yes, we're backing up our data. So I ask, how often do you test these backups? And they say, test the backups. Well, we're not really testing them. They seem to be all right. And so you go years without really testing them, never needing them, and then that disaster strikes, whatever it is, you go to back up from those backups you've been taking, and you find out that they've been failing. Slow recovery time is another piece. This is really the thing that the criminals are exploiting the most. If you're using just an offsite backup and you've got your data offsite, and you ever need to recover from that, has anybody tried to do that? If you've got a couple terabytes of data, you ever try to bring terabytes of data down through the internet? It could be days or weeks before you get that back up and running. Same goes for if you're using tape or any of the traditional forms of backup. If you're just backing it up at the file and folder level, all right, you get a new server in place, you got to install the applications, the operating systems, all the rest. So this slow recovery time is a key leverage that these criminals have when they hit you with ransomware or any of their other viruses, because they know that you'll pay, because even if you are backing up your data, it's going to take you a long time, but business is going to be down, and that's going to be far more costly than anything that they're asking you for. And then obviously risk of infection or theft. A lot of the kind of over-the-counter backups, they're not putting those kind of security procedures in place. To me, this is more of a testament why you should be working with some folks like Mike, because they're going to make sure it's a multi-layered approach. And so risk of infection or theft are going to be much higher on a just traditional form of backup. What we use a little bit differently, it's called intelligent business continuity. And there's a lot of vendors in the space, but it's a growing space. And like I said, we were really the first ones to bring it to the small to mid-sized market. And what this means, it's a little bit different. Obviously, we're backing up all your data, like Mike mentioned, but it does a few more things. First and foremost, it's a hybrid solution. So I mentioned those 2 data centers. You're going to have an on-premise device that's going to be backing up your server or multiple servers right on that device. But it's automatically going to replicate to those 2 data centers, Reading, Pennsylvania, Salt Lake City, Utah. So if something were to just happen to your server, anything, maybe your server just fails, you get hit with ransomware, whatever happens there, well, you could back up all your files right on that on-premise device. You can virtualize, which I'm going to get to that in a minute, all from the on-premise device. But if that on-premise device is compromised for whatever reason, maybe you do have one of those disasters. Maybe there is a storm or there's a fire or something that goes on in your building, and that on-premise device is compromised, we have the exact replica of that data in Reading, Pennsylvania. And then just in case everything fails, when somebody told me early on when I was in my IT career, anytime you're evaluating anything, assume everything fails. What happens if everything gets through your firewalls and your antivirus fails and all the rest? Well, now we've got a copy of your data on site. That goes down. Well, now we've got a copy of your data in Reading, Pennsylvania. What if something truly disastrous is happening and the entire eastern seaboard is up in flames? Well, now you got a third copy of your data on the other side of the country. So really, when you look at a hybrid solution, you want to have multiple copies of your data, different geographical locations. That's one of the other limitations to traditional backup. A lot of times, your one copy of your backup is either in your office or down the street in your IT manager's home or whatever they're doing when they're taking it back. And so if there is some sort of disaster, there's a chance that whatever impacted your server is also going to be impacting that backup. So multiple copies of your data, different geographical locations. The other piece is you want it to be automated. You want to take the user error out of it. We have a system where you're just going to set up your schedule and it's automatically going to be taking those backups at whatever schedule you want and then replicating to the cloud at whatever schedule you want. In addition to just taking the backups in an automated fashion, we actually test the backups automatically every night. And we don't just test that the data's there, we test the virtualization capabilities, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But all of that's happening automatically. And if there is a failure in the backup, Mike and his team are going to get an email that says, hey, there was a failure. Maybe it's a false positive, whatever it is, they're going to be able to be alerted to it so they can take a look at that problem. You're not finding out that there's a backup failure when a disaster strikes. So that's all happening automatically. Now, the biggest thing with business continuity is we don't back things up at just the file and folder level. We don't just say, okay, we're going to back up a certain amount of folders that you want, which most traditional backup solutions do. As Mike mentioned, we take an entire image. We take an entire snapshot of that server that we're backing up, or multiple servers. So we're not just backing up the files and folders. We've got the operating systems, the applications, everything. So it's going to help you on a restoration process, because if your server fails, and now you fail over to the data and you need to now put in a new server, you wipe that one clean, we can do a bare metal restore, and that restoration process is going to be a lot quicker because we can get it looking exactly like your old server did. We can do those restorations to similar hardware. Maybe you've got an old server you were looking to upgrade anyway, it finally failed, you say, I want to go with another vendor, we can do the bare metal restore to this similar hardware as well. But the biggest thing about business continuity, what it comes down to, is the virtualization capabilities. What this means is, and we're going to see it in a little bit, if your server goes down, we're not just saying we've got the backups, we're able to spin up a virtual machine in a matter of minutes. And everyone that was operating off that original server, that on-premise device, that data device sitting in your office, is now going to be operating as your server. Everybody that was accessing the previous server is going to be running off of this on-premise device. And so it's truly a production environment. It's business as usual. We're taking backups, we're in that state. So it's allowing you to say, okay, something occurred, whether we got hit with ransomware, our server crashed. We don't have to wait for that restoration. We don't have to wait to order a new server and put it in place. In that interim, you could be operating right off of that on-premise device. And that's what virtualization gets into. And I'm going to show you where that ties in, especially to what the criminals are doing out there. So I've been giving ransomware-specific presentations for probably 2.5 years now. 2.5 years ago, as I was going around, I would start talking about ransomware, and I'd get a couple head nods, but most people didn't know what it was about, and they definitely weren't really scared of it. As we've gone on, we've seen more and more news stories. I've seen more and more head nods. More and more people in the room have either been impacted directly or they know somebody down the street that was. And then May of last year, WannaCry it. And now it's on the front page of every paper, front news story of every website. And we've never seen anything in the IT community, anything like this. This was a single virus that in a single day hit 220,000 computers. 150 countries were impacted. So now everybody understood it, right? What was interesting about this particular variant of ransomware, it was able to infect a lot of computers all at once. They didn't make a ton of money off it. See, most of the variants out there, what they try to do is they target specific companies, and they know as much about your company as possible, size, location, all the rest, so that when they ask you for a ransom, they're going to know exactly how much they can ask where you might actually pay. That's where you see the stories about a university that gets hit, or a municipality, or a hospital, and they know they can ask those folks for a lot of money. What this variant did, which is a little kind of strange, was it was just $300 across the board. They weren't trying to figure out where the company was located. They weren't trying to figure out the size of the company. They just said $300 across the board. So they only netted about $300,000, which might seem like a big number, but in the grand scheme of things, Last year, from July 1st, 2016, July 1st, 2017, $1 billion changed hands. So $300,000 is only a small group. Yeah.
Anybody paid? Did they get the system restored?
Most of them did. I'm going to get into that in a minute because a lot of folks don't. But so a lot of them did in that regard. So $300 across the board. So in the IT community, we all thought, well, this was just a test, right? Because they didn't really try to maximize as much money that they could have gotten, right? This was just a test, and phase 2 was going to be, all right, now we're going to really figure out how to monetize this, right? So 2 weeks after this WannaCry attack hits, I'm doing a presentation in Allentown, Pennsylvania. There's a gentleman from the FBI, the head of cybersecurity from the Philadelphia office. And he's given a really scary presentation about cyber warfare and all these different types of things. And then he gets into ransomware because obviously it's the hot button topic of the day. So he goes in and tells the story about WannaCry and where it fits in, a lot of the same stories that I've been telling. And then he says, all right, so we've got 2 theories. First theory is exactly what we thought, right? This was just a test. So the FBI is preparing for that next wave. What's it going to look like? The second theory that he had at the time I thought was a little far-fetched. But as time went on and months went on, I really think that the second theory was the one that holds true. The second theory was these criminals never cared if anybody paid the ransom. Anything that they made, that $300,000 was just pure gravy. The second theory is that the entire intent of this attack, this specific attack, they knew it was going to cause worldwide news. The second theory says that the entire attack had one goal: increase the cost of Bitcoin. Now, sounds far-fetched, but look what happened over the next couple of months. And the reason being, Bitcoin's been around for a long time, right? Well, close to a decade now. But for years, the only people that have really been using it, you had some techies that were going and buying it, but really it was used primarily for criminals because they knew it was anonymous. They knew they could do a lot of scary things on the dark web with Bitcoin, and it won't be tracked back to them. And they finally figured out that with ransomware, well, now they can ask you for money. You're going to pay it in Bitcoin. They're never going to get caught. So these guys were accumulating money in Bitcoin when Bitcoin was $100, $200. So for years, it was pretty much stagnant. We saw a little bit of a blip in 2014. And then January 1st, 2016, a single Bitcoin was $443. January 1st of last year was $998, starting to peak up. This first jump, that's May. That's when WannaCry hit. What was happening was you had all these big corporations, mostly in Europe, that were saying, hey, everybody thinks this was phase 1. We got to set up a Bitcoin account so that we're prepared if we get hit with the next phase that we can pay this out. Because if anybody that doesn't have a Bitcoin account, it's not the easiest thing to go set up. You can't just walk into your bank and say, hey, I want to deposit $1,000 into my Bitcoin account. There's 4 people on the team that I'm on. We travel all around the world. And since we do so many presentations, Dado has given us our own Bitcoin account. So then we can talk intelligently about it. We actually have an account. So this was in August. They said, all right, go to Coinbase and say, set up an account, and we're going to fund it with $100. So I do all the things. I get an email from the finance department. All right, the funding is in process. It took 6 days just to get that $100 into my account. So these big corporations are saying to themselves, if I got to go out and get $30,000 in Bitcoin, it might take me a few days to do that, and now I'm down for several days. So they were trying to preempt that, and they're buying Bitcoin, right? So what we saw, and everybody saw it in the news, was this gigantic spike. And on January 1st of this year, it was at $15,000. It actually peaked at over $19,000. And we've seen it come back down. And then you see the stories about, you know, the young 19, 20-year-old kid who became a millionaire overnight because he bought Bitcoin when he was 16, or some savvy investor, and all this. And they're great feel-good stories, right? But the people that were becoming multi-millionaires, 100 millionaires overnight were the criminals who were buying up this Bitcoin, actually getting the Bitcoin from their victims back when it was $100 a Bitcoin, $200 a Bitcoin. They're the folks that became billionaires really overnight because of this gigantic spike. They're the ones that really benefit from it. And so when the FBI agent mentioned that, I hadn't really given much thought to it. Maybe it's right, maybe it's not. We've now seen a sell-off. Is that the criminals now selling it off and taking their profits? The reason why it makes sense is because I know I've been doing the presentation. They've been accumulating, as I mentioned, $1 billion over the course of 12 months, all in Bitcoin. When it was $400, $500 a Bitcoin, when it got to 19,000, think of how much money that Bitcoin was worth to those criminals. And what's scary about this is, for one, it shows you how forward-thinking these guys are. It's not the guy in his basement anymore doing these hacks so they can make a few extra bucks on the side. This is what organized crime is doing. This is what organized crime is doing here in the States. It's what they're doing in Russia and China and Eastern Europe and all over the world. They figured out that there's a ton of money to be made. They can do it basically anonymously and not get caught. and the structure of it is just like a corporation. So that's the scariest part. The second scary part is now they really don't care if they give you your data back. The question that was asked, how many of those people got back? I don't have the statistics specifically for WannaCry, but the FBI will tell you about 75% of the people right now that pay the ransom get some of their data back. 1 in 4 pay the ransom, never get any of their data back. Within that 75%, some people might get some systems back up online. One of the tricks these guys like to do is to say, hey, thank you, here's $2,500 to get your data back. You get the $2,500, say, thank you for the down payment. Now it's another $10,000. Or I gave you one system back, pay me for the second system, right? They're criminals. They're trying to squeeze as much money out of you as possible. And so this actually shows that the $300,000 was just pocket change to them. Their goals were far greater than the money they were going to make off the ransomware. And that's a scarier thought, right? That's a scarier thought to think about. And so when you look at just the prevalence of ransomware out there, I mean, it really is an epidemic at this point. It's been around since 1989. So we're looking at 3 decades of ransomware, but it would only blip up every once in a while, right? We'd see maybe a virus. Most people a few years ago knew about CryptoLocker. That was kind of the name that was synonymous with ransomware. And then all of a sudden, 2013, we started seeing a big uptick. What this is showing you, and you can't read the screen, but this is the more prevalent variants of ransomware out there. There's an estimated 4 million separate variants of ransomware out there. Like I said, I've sat on panels with Homeland Security, FBI, people always asking, what are you guys doing about it? And so there's not much we can do. We could put a lot of resources into shutting down one of these variants, and we'll get a pat on the back, we'll get a great news story and all the rest. Now we got 3,999,000 to go, and new ones popping up every few minutes. So it's almost impossible to keep up with these guys. But what happened right here in 2013? Why did we see this huge spike? The virus has been out there for a long time. What was the huge spike? Again, it was Bitcoin. Criminals out there realized, okay, we can marry these two things. We've got this ransomware delivery system, which is great. We couldn't figure out how to monetize it because we don't want you putting a credit card in because it might get tied back, or you might be able to catch it early enough and they'll reverse the charge, or an ACH payment might get your back to me. Once somebody figured out, hey, we could do this anonymously, I'm going to ask you to pay for it in Bitcoin. We're not going to be caught. Now all of a sudden it became this booming industry. It was really the marriage of those two things that really caused this huge spike. And so I mentioned the $1 billion number. $1 billion, that comes right from the FBI. And it's hard to estimate because only about 1 in 3 of these attacks are being reported. Most of the time, that's because it's the small business community that's being hit. You see the stories about the hospitals and all the rest that I was mentioning, but the vast majority of these attacks are happening at the small business community. And so they figure if I go report it to authorities, the FBI is not going to tell you exactly what that threshold is, but loosely it's about $25,000. They're not going to look into very many. They want you to report it, but they're not going to put any resources into a ransomware attack that's under $25,000. Most of the small businesses are not going to be asked for that much, so they know if I go and report it, it's just more paperwork and all the rest. They're never going to catch these guys anyway. And more importantly, they just need to get back up and running. Folks need to get back up and running as quickly as possible. So they'll pay the ransom, they'll do all the rest. But the actual impact to the community, $1 billion is what changed hands. The impact to the business community around the world, about $75 billion. What makes up this number? Well, what makes up this number is the cost of data loss, the fact that a lot of folks never get their data back, but more importantly, it's the cost of downtime. Remember I was talking about the limitations, the time it would take you to recover all your data. Criminals know they have this. Criminals know they have 2 pieces of leverage. They're going to have your data, and they know that even if you have a backup, that's going to take you a long time to recover, and that cost of downtime is going to be more costly than what they're asking you for. So I know anytime you go to a seminar, webinar, they give you all of these acronyms you're supposed to remember, right? The 2 from this presentation, you go back to your office, be able to answer, or sit down with Mike and his team, and I'm sure they can help you answer it, are your RPO and your RTO. These are the 2 acronyms that the criminals are very well aware of, and they're trying to exploit. Your RPO is your recovery point objective. Very simply, how much data are you at risk of losing at any given time? So simply, how often are you taking your backups? Are you taking them weekly? Well, now you're at risk of losing a week's worth of data. Everybody's in different industries. That might be okay to lose a week's worth of data. That might be an aggressive enough RPO schedule for you. If it's daily, you run the risk of daily, losing a day's worth of data, all the rest. But one caveat to that, which I mentioned earlier, is if you're not testing your backups, no way you can answer that question. You can say, I'm taking hourly backups, been doing it for years. Then you get hit with ransomware, you go to restore, and you find out your backups have been failing for the last 3 weeks. Well, now this star jumps from 1 hour to 3 weeks. So that's what your RPO comes down to. That's a simpler question to be able to answer. But this is the first piece of leverage that they have. They've got your data. You're not backing up your data, got no other recourse but to pay or start over, which is not really an option. But they know that most people are backing up their data. For the most part, people are backing up their data in one part. And if you do that, well, now you've taken out one of their legs. You've taken out one piece of leverage. The second piece of leverage they have is this side of the screen here, your RTO, your recovery time objective. Can you answer the question honestly and say, if our systems went down, how long would it take us to get back up and running? Have we ever done a test? Most folks have not. And for the most part, this number right here is going to be several days. It's going to be several days for you to get back up and running, depending on what type of backup you have. Criminals know this. They know that this is the real piece of leverage. It's that time frame right there that really adds to that $75 billion number. All right, are you going to pay me my $3,000 ransom, or are you going to be down for 3 days? The cost of being down for 3 days is far going to exceed what they're asking you for the most part. And that's why so many people pay. Most people are taking care of this side. The vast majority of people, especially in the small and mid-sized business community, don't have this side taken care of, and that's why they pay. So we did a ransomware specific survey. We did one in 2016. It was the largest of its kind. We had a larger one in 2017. We interviewed two groups of people. We interviewed folks in the managed services community, so folks like OptfinITy all around the world. We got 1,700 respondents there. And we also interviewed folks in the small business community. What we found was we interviewed these outsourced IT companies, and they said 6 and 7 of them come back and say, yeah, I've had a client hit with ransomware in the last couple of years. 6 and 7. We did this study. We started the study on July 1st of last year, so it was after the WannaCry attack had hit. 6 and 10 of them, 60% had one of their clients hit in the first 6 months of last year. So we're talking about a true epidemic, and the people in that industry, they really know that. They know those numbers. Now, when you look at who's being hit and the amount of money that's being asked for, the average payment, $2,000. I mentioned that billion-dollar number. $709 million of that is estimated to come from the small to mid-sized business community. So you see a huge number from it. You break $709 million down into $2,000 increments. Now you see how big this net is, right? How many people are getting hit and have no other recourse but to pay. So this shows two things. It shows that they're definitely hitting the small to mid-sized business community because they're only asking for a few $1,000s. It makes up 70% of the money that they actually make, but more people are paying at that level because they don't have any other recourse but to pay. And when we talk to the business community that's been hit, 57% of them said that they lost data. 57%. And the more important number, 3 and 4 of them reported business-threatening downtime. There's a stat out there that says anyone that's down for a week or more, 74% of them are out of business within a year. So small to mid-sized businesses in general, they can't afford that downtime. So 3 and 4 of those folks that were hit with ransomware reported business-threatening downtime. Enough downtime where it almost put them out of business, or actually did put them out of business. So the surprising number to me from this report was this one. So 2016, we did this report. 88% of the managed service providers out there were highly concerned about ransomware. They live and breathe this every day. That number went up slightly to 90%. So 9 and 10 of them said they're highly concerned about ransomware and live and breathe this stuff, right? But when we talk to the small business owners, 2016, 34%. So just over 1 in 3 of them were highly concerned. This study didn't even begin until after WannaCry, right? The story that was on the front page of every newspaper. I thought this number would tick way up because now everybody's aware of it. It only went up 4 points. Only 38%, less than 4 in 10 small business owners are highly concerned about ransomware. $1 billion a year industry being controlled by organized crime. Most business owners, they still aren't concerned about it. Because criminals love this stat, right? Because they know that they can continue to attack and attack and attack, and people aren't going to put the right precautions in place. So, like I said, most people have a backup solution. The hard part is to try to figure out what that RTO costs, right? It's going to differ for everybody in the room, and it's going to differ for every kind of industry, size of your company, what kind of industry you're in, and all the rest. So we've got 2 examples to try to figure out what that cost looks like. And remember, they got 2 pieces of leverage. They've got your data, taking care of this with a backup solution. How do we figure out what this costs you? So I'll give you 2 kind of larger scale RTO cost stuff, but you could kind of scale it down, and that's really where you want to bring in Mike and his team to figure out what that looks like. So the first one is the San Francisco Metro Transit Authority. You might have seen this story because they got a lot of coverage. Black Friday 2016, they got hit with ransomware. Now, to their credit, they came out and immediately put out a statement. They said, yes, we've been hit with ransomware. We were asked for $73,000 in ransom, and we have no intention of paying it. The government recommends we don't pay it, and we've got a very robust backup solution. So we know we're going to get our systems back up online. Now, the systems that were hit and were locked up and encrypted were the systems that allowed them to collect fares for the bus system and the light rail. So now they have no way to collect fares. So they get their IT team together, they huddle together, and they say, okay, we've done these drills, we've done these disaster demos of what's going to happen, how long are we down? IT team was very confident. They said, we'll be fully back up and running by Sunday morning. We're looking at 2 days of being down, not being able to collect fares. So they had two options, right? They could either shut down the light rail and the bus system, the two busiest shopping days of the year, which really wasn't an option at all, or they can go with door number 2, which was give away free rides. So they gave away free rides on the bus system and the light rail for 2 days. The city of San Francisco loved it, right? So we didn't see a lot of news stories after this talking about what that cost was, right? The kind of success story was, hey, they were down for 2 days, but they got up online and they were able to keep the systems up and running. So I've been able to do some math for them, right? Because they don't want to report how much money they lost, but they do have a lot of information on their website. According to their website, they provide about 735,000 rides every day. My assumption is going to be that over those 2 days, that number's higher, but let's just take their number. They don't break down within that 735,000 how many of them ride the bus, how many ride in the light rail, right? But I do know it costs $1 to ride the bus, $2.25 to ride the light rail. So if they're down for 2 days, they lost anywhere between $1.5 and $3.5 million in revenue. They could have paid the $73,000. It didn't. So they lost about $1.5 to $3.5 million worth of revenue. That's the math that all the criminals want to do. It's going to scale down to whatever kind of business you're in, but that's the type of math. That's that RTO piece right there. And they know that most small businesses, they can't have some sort of impact like this, so they'll pay. Now, last month, I'm doing a presentation in New York City, and the kind of main presenter there was the head of cybersecurity for the entire FBI. And I'm going on after him, so I'm thinking to myself, man, my stats better be right, because I don't want this kind of prove me wrong. But he actually told this exact story. It's the first time I've actually seen the FBI tell this story. Told the story up to the point of right here, and he goes, I have no idea how much money they lost, right? He didn't do the math. And he goes, but I'm here in New York City, and I can tell you right now, if that happened to our system in New York City, cost us $50 million a day. That same attack, when we're down for 2 days, it'd be $100 million. It costs about $50 million a day. That came right from the FBI. But again, this is me and the FBI kind of doing some math. The second story I have, I think, is a little bit better because it's going to show you a third party coming in, analyzing the cost of downtime and giving you a hard, concrete number. So last year I'm in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm sitting on a panel. One of the gentlemen that was on the panel with me sold cybersecurity insurance. So he's telling stories about why you need cybersecurity insurance, and a lot of folks do. That's a different conversation to have. But he told this story that afterwards I picked his brain about because I'm kind of looking at it at a different angle. So he tells a story about this utility company out in Lansing, Michigan. They got hit with ransomware. They were asked for $25,000. Now, this is a very large utility company. They had an IT staff of 51 folks just on their IT team. So they spent a day saying, we don't need to pay this ransom. We're ready. We could do this all in-house. We're going to get our systems back up online. After a day of trying that, they threw up the white flag and said, we have no other recourse but to pay this $25,000. So they paid the $25,000, right? Supposed to get all their systems back up online. Problem is, that didn't happen right away. They got it back in piecemeal, they had to pay a little bit more money, and they were actually down for about a full week before all of their systems were up and running. They're down for a week. Now, they had cybersecurity insurance. The reason why this guy was telling the story was, this is why you need cybersecurity insurance. So they started to put together a claim. And their claim was them being down 1 week cost them $2.4 million. Now, within that number, $400,000 of that was upgrades they felt that they needed to their IT department, their security team, all the rest, all the different multi-layered approach. So they couldn't ask for reimbursement for that, but just for the downtime alone, they put together a claim for $2 million. Put that together, they've got all their facts and figures behind it, they send it off to the insurance company. Now, I know we got some insurance people in the room, that's great, but my experience is they're not going to pay out on claims that aren't real, right? They're going to make sure that these are real. So after they vetted it, made sure all the T's were crossed and I's were dotted, they cut a check for $1.9 million. $100,000 deductible, $1.9 million. The guy tells the story like, hey, this is why you need cybersecurity insurance. I'm thinking to myself, hey, this validates that cost of downtime. They could have paid they paid the $25,000, but the cost of downtime far exceeded that. And they're going to pat themselves on the back and say, thank God we've got cybersecurity insurance. Well, they paid the $25,000. They had the $100,000 deductible. They had to upgrade their systems and spend close to $500,000 on that. And then I became so fascinated with this story, I started following, doing Google alerts to figure out what was happening. And there's a story that came out that 6 months after this attack, 25% of their IT staff had quit. And they interviewed some of these folks, and they said that the environment just became too toxic. Everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else. I'm not getting paid enough to do this. I'm going to go out and do something on my own. So the other ripple effects to it, beyond the fact they were down for a week, lost all this revenue, had to pay the ransom, they then had to go out and try to replace 25% of their IT staff. Mike, how hard is it to find really qualified IT staff? It's not that easy, right? And so the ripple effects of this are huge. So this is the third party coming in and validating that cost of downtime. These are real numbers. And kind of the way that these guys are getting in has really evolved as well. You used to get those emails from your long lost uncle saying, hey, send me $5,000, I'm going to send you $1 million. They're not doing that anymore. They're going to use socially engineered spear phishing attacks for the most part. So when that email comes in, it's going to look like every other email in your inbox. I'll give you 2 stories about that. I can give you 3 because I have a new one that just happened this weekend. But one of them is there's a sales rep at our office, the guy actually who covers that New York office. And he was telling me at that event, this is the end of January. Anybody that's in sales knows the end of the month is really big, right? He got an email, looked like it came from one of his partners saying, hey, click here, an invoice is ready. Click here to review it. Now this guy Joe is former military. He's like very buttoned up, and he's like, this doesn't look right. I deal with this partner every day. He's never done this before. He picks up the phone, he calls the guy and said, hey, he's got an email from you. It looked a little fishy. He's like, I never sent that email. And I'm sure if Joe had clicked on that hyperlink, it would have executed a file, most likely to be ransomware. Maybe even scarier because, it's data and people might want to try to attack us. But that's showing you how smart they are. They know they can hit sales reps at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and the vast majority of sales reps out there in the world are going to click that button because they want to get that sale before the end of the month, right? So that's one story. But that same presentation I gave down in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where the guy came up with this great theory about Bitcoin, he also, in the middle of his presentation, he clicked through and there's a picture of this house. He goes, anybody recognize this house? And this is a big seminar, probably 150, 200 people in the room. I was kind of looking around, what's this guy talking about? A guy in the back leans forward, he goes, hey, that's my house. Guy goes, hey, yeah, congratulations, it's a gorgeous house. And you just got a promotion at work, right? Guy's like, yeah, I did. And he graduated from Penn State in 2002. He starts rattling off all these figures about this guy in the back of the room. Now he's got the whole audience kind of murmuring back and forth to each other. He goes, I bet you think I used all the resources I had from the FBI to gather all this information about this gentleman, right? Not at all. I talked to the organizer of the event. I got the list of attendees ahead of time. I picked one of you at random. And the first thing I did was I found you on LinkedIn. Found out where you worked, where you went to college, all the rest. And then I found you on Facebook. That's where I got this gorgeous picture of your house, right? Once I knew what you looked like, now I can go on Facebook and know who you are. I can get this picture of your house. Then I try to find you on Twitter and Instagram and all these different places. And in 15 minutes, I've got a really good idea of who you are, who you work for, who your contacts are. So if I'm a criminal, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick off the low-hanging fruit. So you went to Penn State, right? One of the largest alumni associations in the world. I'm going to send you out an email. It's going to have the same template, same look and feel as every other email you've ever gotten from the alumni association. Within that, there's going to be a hyperlink. Just say, click here for all the news you need to know about our 15-year reunion festivities. Because it looks like every other email you've ever gotten, you're going to click on it. But even if that doesn't work, well, then I'm going to dig a little deeper and I'm going to find out who your coworkers are. Maybe I'll create a dummy email account so it looks like it's coming from your coworker, somebody in your finance department. All that stuff is pretty readily available on LinkedIn. Maybe a vendor. And then eventually I'm going to catch you on a Friday afternoon trying to clean up your emails before you go home for the weekend. You're clicking through it. I'm going to catch you to sleep at the wheel. You're going to click on one of those executable links, and I've got you. That's what these criminals are doing. They're going to spend the 15 minutes up front to try to make sure that their success rate is that much higher. The last example I'm going to give you is very quick. It just happened this weekend. My wife's grandmother comes over to my house on Sunday. She's in tears. She brings over a laptop. I think I got some sort of infection. But what happened, Karen? She opens up her laptop. There's all these big pop-ups all over. She goes, something popped up. It said it was from Microsoft, and they needed to access my computer because they found something. I'm like, well, Microsoft's never just going to do this. I'm like, what happened? She goes, well, a number popped up, so I called the number, and I spoke to this guy, and he said he needed to remote into my computer. I'm like, did you let him? Yeah, I let him. I didn't know. So now this guy, now you can see them running all of these files in the background where I don't even think it was ransomware. It was just, I think they were trying to steal some stuff from her. Just shut everything down, but it shows you the sophistication. That's one of the other things that it'll look like. You know, pop-up screen, hey, it's your help desk. Click here because we're going to help you out. That's what we're looking for, and they will attack anyone. It shows you that they will attack anyone because they were asking for $300 from her. clean up a system that they infected, right? So that's the sophistication. And so what business continuity does is it's going to really take care of that left-hand side of the screen, right? Because what it does is, remember how this is working. This is your server, right? It gets locked up with ransomware. Because everything that lived on this server lives on this on-premise data device, we're able to spin up that virtual machine in a matter of minutes, get you back up and running. That RTO has gone from days or weeks down to minutes or hours, depending on how large your system is. Everyone that was running off of this server is going to be running off of this on-premise device. Just a simple call to Mike and his team, and they're going to get you back up and running. You could be in this virtualized state for hours, days, weeks, however long it takes you to get this server wiped clean or replaced. And then once that's ready, we're going to do a bare metal restore, like I mentioned, and get everything back onto that new piece of hardware. And it's going to not just get you back to when the ransomware attack occurred, it's really going to get you back to exactly where you were when you're ready to do that, because we've been taking active backups in that state. So you really have reduced the amount of downtime again and data loss, because you're not even losing any data when you're in that virtualized state. Yes?
Doesn't the malware get backed up too?
So that's a good question. So one of the things that kind of differentiates us from traditional backup is typically layered upon previous backups. So there's a real risk of you getting that infection and now all of your backups have been infected. We've got what's called inverse chain technology. It's a proprietary piece of technology, which means that once we take that base image of that server, from there on you set up your schedule. We're just taking incremental block level changes, and they're all independent of one another. So if you get hit with ransomware, that particular backup will be infected. You're going to roll back to your last clean backup at whatever schedule you want, and there's no risk of it impacting previous backups. I also get the question, well, how do you know that that ransomware is not going to get up to the cloud? Well, we encrypt data in transit and at rest up to the cloud, military-grade encryption, and by nature, that data cannot be encrypted twice. So once it's encrypted and we go to re-encrypt it, it can't get up there. So there's not a risk of that ransomware getting to our cloud either. So all of those things, all those data points are independent of one another. It's a great question. So there's not a risk of that. That one particular backup, yes, there's nothing we can do about it because we're just backing up whatever data is on that system. So if it's encrypted, we're backing up encrypted data. But you're going to set your schedules, and when I show you the demo of it, you're going to see what that looks like. They're all independent of one another. So the benefits are pretty clear, right? Reducing that downtime. That's the big leverage that these criminals have. Reducing that downtime because we can get you up and running. Most of the time, when you're in that virtualized state, the people in the office don't even know that you're running off the data. That's how smooth the transition is. Most of the people just come in and have no idea. It's going to help your RTO and RPO, both in making those more aggressive and fitting your needs. So you're going to have an aggressive enough RPO. We're going to set that schedule and say, hey, I can't lose more than an hour's worth of data. Well, that's what your schedule is going to be. You're going to be able to answer that, but also the RTO. You're going to be able to say, okay, I know how much downtime will occur. I can answer that question. And in terms of that RPO, I talked about how we test backups. We don't just test that the data's there. We actually spin up a virtual machine every night, bring it up to a boot screen. It would say, like, we got it up there, and all these to test all of these virtualization capabilities. And Mike and his team will get an email with a picture of that boot screen that'll say, yes, not only did we test the backups, we tested the virtualization capabilities. It's called screenshot verification. Again, it's another proprietary thing to data. So that we're making sure that the business continuity aspect is being tested as well. And the beauty of it is you can either do these things locally from the device. My battery's running low, good thing we'll wrap it up. We could either do this locally from the on-premise device, or we could do it from the cloud, either one of our data centers. So if that on-premise device is compromised, we could spin it up from Reading, Pennsylvania. For whatever reason, we can't do it from Reading, Pennsylvania, we could do it from Salt Lake City, Utah. The big test for data, to be honest with you, we're located right on Long Island Sound. When Hurricane Sandy hit, we were all impacted. And a lot of our clients at that point were based in the Northeast. We were still a growing company. And we had, after Hurricane Sandy, thousands of businesses, all different shapes and sizes, all different industries, operating out of our cloud, operating out of our data centers, a lot of which wouldn't be in business today if they didn't have that ability, because it was weeks before their server rooms were drained out, new racks were put in, and all the rest. But we were able to say at the end of it, not only did we just keep all these businesses up and running, at the end of the day, we didn't lose a single piece of data from anyone impacted from Hurricane Sandy. That made kind of nationwide and worldwide news and kind of propelled us. So you have all these abilities, both from the local device or from either one of the data centers. And so now's the fun part. Mike, how are we going to select who gets to smash this laptop? That's a great one. Anybody remember what RPO is? Recovery point objective. You ready to smash a laptop? I'm going to give you guys, just to make sure everybody's safe, safety first. Give everybody in the first couple rows some safety goggles. I got a little hammer, so you gotta hurry up. Isn't everyone so frustrated with technology that you want to smash this thing? All right, you ready to smash it? I'm gonna put it down on the ground. Not my laptop. Let's go. I'm gonna break this table. So here's your hammer. Not a big hammer, so you gotta really get into it. But I've done sledgehammers, but sledgehammers just quick, so they anticlimactic. You got it. I think you killed it.
I think it's pretty good.
Oh, I'm having way too much fun. All right.
Well, I think that's it. So again, remember, we're taking an image base. We've got everything. Here we go. So I'm going to be able to do this from the hotspot on my phone too. So you talk about the what you need to, like the resources you need to do these things. It's not a ton, right? So this is what Mike would be looking at. He would see all of his data units in one space, right? So I just got the one. It's a little small 1 terabyte device. It's this big. It's small. We've got scale all the way up to 120 terabytes. What we'll do is I'll show you exactly how we do it here, start to finish. So this is what the device would look like. It tells me that the last check-in was 4 minutes ago. I back up hourly. I don't have a ton backed up. 39 gigs of data. Again, you'll be able to set your schedules in here. If you needed just a specific file, it's called Backup Insights. So you could say, okay, I need 2 points of time. I think I deleted a file sometime last week. It's very simple to go restore that. If you want to do a full virtualization, all you do is go to the Restore tab. You're going to select the system. Obviously, you can be backing up multiple servers. I only just have the one agent deployed here. And then it's going to give you the options. You want to virtualize from the local device, which is going to be the fastest way. Virtualize in the cloud would be a little tough because I'm using it for my hotspot on my phone. When you do the bare metal restore, all this stuff would happen right there. And then I mentioned those recovery points all being independent of one another. If I knew that a ransomware attack happened at noon, I'd be reverting back to my 11 a.m. backup. All the rest, all of those are independent of one another. And I have a schedule where I'm not taking it hourly overnight, stops at 6 p.m., starts up again at 8 a.m. the next morning. So you're going to select it, and you're going to start the virtualization. And in this screen, you could sit here. Here's where we're going to start the VM. We also have something new called this rescue agent, which we're not going to do now. But what that allows you to do is, when you're ready to do that bare metal restore, that used to be the piece where there was some downtime. It's going to take you a few hours to get all that data back on. What we can do now is keep you in a virtualized state while that bare metal restore is going on. So it's really just the cost, the timing of a reboot. On this side of the screen, we could, if we want to allocate more RAM, all the rest. This is really for more complicated systems. We might have multiple servers that you need to virtualize all at once. That's why you do these testing. But in that short amount of time, here's that screen that's been backed up to my laptop. You're going to be able to see it right now. So in that amount of time, you're going to click on it. Here we are, OptfinITy presentation. And there's the presentation. So that took off the hotspot of my phone all of maybe 45 seconds to a minute. And so that really is how quickly you can virtualize. And the key here is you want to do a test of this stuff, right? Because everybody's going to have different systems here. So you talk to Mike and his team, and they're going to be able to tell you exactly what that is. And that's how quickly you can virtualize. So we got to have the fun part here, where we got to smash the laptop. I could pull this back up and just finish up the presentation, but there's no other slides. So if anybody has any questions for me, we've got some time left. Questions for Mike or his team? Got plenty of time left. Question?